Fundamentally, we want to look at hiring of sales leaders. And when I say leaders, I mean both sales champions as well as sales managers. However, we want to distinguish between the two for several reasons as will emerge. And then all the questions are pertaining to that specific context. So that's what we're going to talk about. And in general, what we've seen is that hiring is considered an event. It's something that is seen as an impediment that most managers think of getting past and working towards the revenue growth or whatever their business responsibility is. Yet, we all know that hiring is one of the most important decisions that senior managers make, including CEOs. And specifically, if they are growth-minded, then hiring of sales team is, as you all would agree, would be perhaps the most important decision that a CEO can make. At the same time, we recognize that the cost of bad hiring can range anywhere from $600,000 and above, depending upon situations. But most cases where the base salary is $100,000, the cost of mishiring is over $1 million oftentimes. So the topic is very important. What I'd like to get at is an understanding from you, from your perspective and experiences, as to what are the key drivers of hiring decisions for sales leaders. And when we talk about sales leaders, it's both sales managers and salespeople. Lisa, we'll begin with you.
Sure. I think that it's really critical, especially when hiring sales associates, that a company understands they're not looking to hire from a pool of one. And they're not looking for average performers, they're looking for sales superstars. And as you said, the cost of someone not working out within an organization is tremendous, especially when the learning curve is long. So it's critical for sales managers and CEOs to understand what the proper profile is for someone that can track to sales success and be a potential superstar, and making sure that you've got the processes in place to be able to select the proper people.
And what has been your experience? What's your background, Lisa?
My background is I ran a 40-man sales force for a Fortune 100 company with 50% turnover for the company. Luckily, my region only had 30% turnover. So we had 4 teams of managers, so we were constantly in the interviewing and selection mode. And I did that for over 8 years. So within that time period, I not only had to be responsible for staffing this 40-man sales force, but teaching my managers as well how to properly select the potential superstars.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. And John, what's your take and what's your background?
Well, coming from a medical and a pharmaceutical background as a sales rep, a sales trainer, and a sales manager, if you mishire in pharmaceutical, you're looking at well over somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 in losses. Now, I've hired a sales force of 250 for a pharmaceutical company and trained them, and I built the training and development department at Sigma Aldrich globally. What we learned is that sales reps have to be matched to the territory and they have to be matched to the company. To give you an example, I'm a consultant now, and I had one client that told me to go out and find the best sales rep in his market to hire. And what he didn't understand is he was a little distributor, and most top sales reps that have any background, they have a list of clients that they already have a relationship with. They either want a high income or they want room for promotion, which he didn't have. So it's crucial that you match, that you understand as a CEO what you have to offer, and then you match that to what your top sales rep is looking for, if you want to keep them around at any amount of time.
So you've had a lot of experience in hiring and onboarding sales teams.
A great deal of experience, and it's just crucial for. I used to say to the managers at Sigma-Aldrich, if I give you 8 to 12 sales reps, that's well over $1 million of assets to the company. Every year I want to know that those people come back, that they're more valuable to the company. They're better trained, they're more seasoned, they have better relationships. And I held my managers responsible for that. I had one manager walk in, and she was a brand new manager, top sales rep that was promoted to manager. She says, I'm going to fire all the sales reps and just bring in new ones. And I looked at her and I said, so where are you going to go to work in 2 years? She said, what do you mean? And I said, it's going to take you months to replace 8 sales reps. And that's assuming you get the right sales reps. And then you have to train those sales reps. You're going to miss next year's quota, and you're probably going to underperform or miss the second year's quota, and we're going to terminate you. So where are you going to go to work next?
Tim, you want to go over what's your take and what's your background, describing briefly, why should people listen to you?
I've been working in the advertising field for over 15 years. I've had ads published nationally. I've done everything from direct mail marketing, search engine optimization, website design. So I come from a diverse advertising, and I work in the advertising field. That's my primary focus, but I've had to train. First of all, I've interviewed thousands of people for sales positions as well as management positions. And there's definitely a distinction between the two, and we have to be able to understand what the criteria is in order for us to effectively put the right person in play. When you're looking for the salesperson, I typically, right now in today's working environment, because of the economy, everyone thinks there's this pool of talent that is out there, because of the attrition of the sales force. And what I'm finding is that's clearly not the case, that there are the has-beens in a lot of the cases, and I think it's really crucial to find people that are up and coming, that they're on their way up. Finding somebody in that mid-tier focus is ultimately that sweet spot. I've had people work with many people with experience, and they tend to not have what it takes in today's environment. 10, 15 years ago, worked really well. But this is definitely a different world that we're in today, and if we do not focus on that, the criteria of hiring has changed so drastically over the last, I'd say, 5 years. The space has gotten smaller. We want better qualifications, so therefore there's really not that perfect fit. It really takes hard work to hire the right person. So you're looking at, as John was saying earlier, but you're looking at the investment just from the resources that you have to put into hire. If you make the wrong mistake, you just wasted all that time and energy hiring the wrong person just from the people that are doing the process. So it's so crucial right now to really have a clear understanding and focus, as well as, to the point of what's the career path. I think a lot of people in today's world are looking for what's the next steps, what's the corporate ladder. Everybody wants to climb that corporate ladder. That's part of the American way. And if we're allowed to, if you're able to lay that out in front of them, you'll have a better experience of hiring, and therefore you'll get top quality people too, because they feel the excitement, they see the vision of where you're taking this thing, and ultimately they're going to have a better sales force, which revenues then should be up.
And I would like to get back to that question everybody has raised, or issue that everybody has raised about hiring the top talent. But let's give Lee a chance to again talk about himself and what's his general take.
There's no such thing as a great salesperson. And that always gets CEOs bristling to, wait a minute, of course there's great salespeople, and I always tell them I can prove it. How many of these so-called great salespeople have they hired? Fantastic resume, great pedigree, but failed in their organization. Right? We can all take a salesperson who's been enormously successful in one company, put them in another company, and they fail miserably. I can take someone who's failed in one company, put them in another role, and they're a superstar. And it comes back to something Lisa touched upon, which is the profile. And putting together that profile of your ideal salesperson so that you know what you're looking for. So instead of looking across the table saying, gee, is this a great closer or a strong prospector, we've got a profile, and we're looking to see, is there a match between what we say someone has to have to succeed in this role and the candidate on the other side. And so a little bit about my background. I'm a sales management strategist. My consulting firm is Sales Architects, and I built sales organizations for over 20 years, and today I help companies identify and hire the right salespeople, onboard them effectively, and ensure that their activities align with the needs of the business.
Thank you, Lee. And this is great as a starting point. You've raised two very important, not just you, but all of us have raised two very important points here. One is about the model of profiling the particular salesperson's role, and second is about the hiring of the best people. You know, you're all probably familiar with this book, Who, and it's a great book in many ways. And there are several other such great books, but this book in particular is about the idea of identifying and hiring the very best performers, top 10% who can perform at, who have the 90% chance of success of that role. Now, it's easy to say hire top performers, but there's an issue of finding them, and secondly, attracting them to join, and thirdly, onboarding them that Lee talked about. So, Lisa, what's your take on the 80-20 principle or the 90-10 principle for Who, and what's your take on the ability to execute on that strategy, and how successful is it?
Well, I think the 80-20 or 90-10 rule absolutely does apply in certain organizations. The key is to get more than just that 10% of your sales force, you know, producing the 90% of the results, and finding a good percentage of your sales team that are top performers. So I do think that it does come to play, but again, my company is Business Development University, and we do a lot of sales training, coaching, and consulting, but one of the biggest areas and the biggest growth area for my company is helping companies find really good sales associates. And it is not only a tough process to be able to find really good associates to interview, but then making sure the companies have a good process to be able to select the really great individuals. Because nowadays people are very prepared for these interviews, and they understand what to do in order to sell themselves, and it's really, how do you get beyond that? How do you peel back the layers and really get them to authenticate their resume and get beyond what they prepared for the interview to really determine whether this is somebody that's a good fit for the organization?
So Lisa, I hear you saying that the interview process can be fudged, because salespeople obviously are the best at selling themselves, and they should be able to master that process. And so it's hard to identify the top performers. And I will jump here onto Tim, because he said something along those lines. So I would like to ask you, Tim, is it true that the sales interview can be fudged, and it's hard to find the best people?
Absolutely. I think it's one of the toughest situations we face today. I can tell you, using technology definitely has helped with that. There's so many different ways you can go about finding out about a person prior to the actual interview. I mean, I will Google them, I'll search their name, I will Facebook them, I will LinkedIn them. I find that the LinkedIn tends to be the best for really looking at somebody's resume and kind of matching it up. That's the first thing I do when I get a resume across my desk, is I go to LinkedIn, see if they're on there, and also what's been said about them. You know, how many recommendations do they have? You know, if they're going to come in and tell me they're the greatest thing since sliced bread, I'm hoping to see that I see a lot of recommendations that can validate that. Otherwise, you know, I look at it as, who are you? I don't know you. You just, it's funny. You just, you know, everybody has I never had anybody come to my office and say, listen, you hire me, I'm going to fail. And I think I would hire that person just because I think of their being so honest, that I think it would be a great opportunity to just to say, hey, listen, at least you know who you are. I can work with that. You know, but ultimately, salespeople are the best at selling themselves. I mean, ultimately, that's what their goal is to do. But the number one way I find to really validate is going on to LinkedIn and doing some searches. And ultimately, LinkedIn's such a small world that you can find other people that know these people, and you can actually email them and say, hey, tell me a little about such and such. Would you mind giving me a little background on what you think of them? So ultimately, you have a better idea of this person coming through the door, and it really makes the interview process that much better. Plus, too, it shows that you did your homework as well as they did their homework, which I think speaks highly for any organization that's looking to hire a salesperson, because that's the one thing you were looking for is, do they practice what they preach? Do they step up to the plate and deliver the kind of results or the expectations in advance? I'm going to interview you, but I hope you do some research on me. I'm going to do some research on you, because this is ultimately a marriage. And if the marriage goes south, we all know what happens. A lot of times people get stuck, and if they say it's cheaper to keep her or cheaper to keep him than it is to move on. Well, that's kind of what we get stuck with sometimes with salespeople too, is we just hold on to them for the wrong reasons and we don't move ahead. So LinkedIn tends to be the #1 way for me personally to get the best results from really validating someone's resume and looking at the right person.
Now I agree with you, Tim, 100%. And my question to you would be, and anyone else can answer that as well. It's true that LinkedIn, Facebook, and so much of research is out there, references that you can check, and these are all ways to sieve through the candidates and identify the bad ones. Is the process of identifying the good candidates that hard, or is there something else that one of you will advise in terms of taking actions to identify the best of the candidates?
Well, I think that all salespeople have the best intentions, and they have the best at heart. Everybody goes into the next process with, I'm going to make this my last place I'm going to work for. I'm going to make this the greatest thing for us. This is the intent behind this whole entire process, is everyone walks in with the right ideas. But what ultimately happens is that they're selling themselves, and they do such a great job. And if they sold themselves on the interview process like they did on sales calls.
I agree. My question was, is there anything else that we can do? And I'll go to John in a moment. But are there things other than sieving through the candidates? Are there other things that you recommend finding candidates with?
I would like to see their W-2s. I like to actually have them bring in what they've made over the time frame to really verify. If they've told me they've made $100,000 or $200,000, I'd like to see that. I also like to see awards and any kind of accolades they've received. And here's the thing. I like to see when the last time they won the award. So here we are in 2011. If the last time they won an award it was in 2000, I got an issue with that. Just because it's been a long time since you've been successful. So therefore, I don't know if this is going to be the right move for you in my organization based on that data.
John, and I'll get to you, Lee. I know you are holding yourself to say certain things which are very different from what everybody else is talking about, and I'd like to hear that. But John, why don't you respond the way you were trying to respond earlier?
One of the other things we do is we have 5 or 6 people interview someone, but one of the simple screens that I use is I ask them what they know about the company that they're applying for. If it's a public company, do they know the stock price for today? What can they tell me about the company? And the reason for that is so many people out there looking for a job, not a position with a specific company, that they don't come prepared. And that tells me when they go out to make a sales call, they're probably not going to get prepared for the sales call either. So I ask them, tell me about the company, what's the stock price, if there's a stock price, what's the current news, and that screens out a lot of people. The one thing that I did really well at Sigma is I was always the last interviewer. So they would get 3 to 5 people to interview during a day in person. And then I would say, it's been a rough day. Sit back and relax before I take you to the airport. Put your feet up on the desk and how you feeling? And I would get them to tell me things that they didn't tell any of the other interviewers. And I found the best, and I got rid of the worst within 15-20 minutes. But they were so worn down from the other interviews that their guard was down. And but all those things that I heard the other people say are true. I know that there's thought leaders out there, 80-20 rule. There's 20% are thought leaders, 80% of followers. And I want to know who I'm hiring. Is this a thought leader or is this a follower? And by doing the interview process, it doesn't take me long to find out how do they solve problems. What do they do if they get in front of a customer that blows up at them? When's the last time that they had a problem with a manager, and how did they handle it? If I ask those questions right, they will really dump on somebody if they're a bad rep. And if they're a good rep, they'll sit there and not even blink and tell me how they took care of it, and the relationship was mended and everybody went on. So for me, it's all about the interviewing, and you have to be really good at getting people comfortable with you.
Wonderful. I think we'll get back to interviewing method in a little while. I think those are some great insights. Now, Lee, you have a Lee, you have a different take on this, right?
Well, you started this question with the 80-20 or the 90-10 rule, and you're asking about the validity of it or what our experiences are with it. And here's really the issue with that. Companies that hire salespeople make a huge mistake. You should never hire salespeople. What you're really doing is making an investment in revenue. And so if you're making an investment in revenue, how can you afford 80% of your investment to tank? And so if you take the average CEO and say, I want $30,000 as an investment in a project, there'll be 4 committees and 2 blue ribbon panels before you ever get to $30,000. But ask that same CEO about hiring a $30,000 salesperson, oh sure, no problem, we'll go ahead and take it. It's the same $30,000 that we're talking about, but the same level of scrutiny is not put in place. And so when you look at it from an investment perspective and say, okay, we don't hire salespeople, we make an investment in revenue, so the process by which you analyze sales talent is very, very different. Your process for bringing them into your organization and the process by which you manage them is also very different. So just saying I'm going to sign up for that 80-20 or 90-10 rule really doesn't work in business, simply because of the expense associated with it. We talked a little earlier about the cost of a bad hire. So many businesses can't afford to have a failure rate of 80% of its people.
While that is all very true, I think what you're saying is absolutely correct, that we should aim towards performing at the top 20% levels across the board. Unfortunately, the 80-20 principle is always true in practice. And so what you're describing is the ideal, which is what we should be following. And if we did, I think the performance levels will go up. I absolutely agree with you. Now, taking cue on this very issue, I would like to ask you a question about capability versus achievement. All of you have described methods by which you identify people's performance in the past. So my question to you guys was, and specifically actually to all of you, is that the issue of capability versus achievement. Most of the recs that are created are around the idea of capability and skills and the like. Very little is about achievement often. And there is, of course, the reason for debate on whether we should hire capable people or people who have demonstrated achievement in the past. And most often, there is not a good fit with achievement when you're looking for specifics. Something or the other is missing. So what's your take on hiring people that are seen as capable versus those who have demonstrated clear achievement, given that it's very hard to find people who have great achievement exactly in the field that you are asking to hire? So Lisa, what's your take on that?
Well, it's one thing to find people that have success in your particular field, but I agree with Tim. The best predictor of future success is past success. And I also agree with Tim in that I'm looking for past success in the past couple years as opposed to 10 years ago. To me, sales success is a function of 3 areas. Am I doing the right activities? Do I have a good process, and that would include the skills? And am I highly motivated, and do I have a good attitude? So when you're evaluating and assessing who would be a good fit for your organization, you have to look at what activity levels are required for sales success. Do they have a good process? And that, again, is focusing on the skills. But a lot of what's important to me is, are they highly motivated? Are they willing to do what the average performers are not necessarily willing to do? And are they willing to go to the next level as far as achieving success? Are they highly motivated to achieve it?
What about when you're hiring fresh candidates? Over there, you don't have a track record of sales success. So what do you do there?
Well, it's a great question. One of my favorite techniques is to have them. Everybody's dealt with salespeople in their lifetime. whether they were, wherever they go, there's a sales experience happening in every facet of life. Sales is all around us. You can't escape it. It's every facet. I mean, my kids sell me every day on junk I should buy them, and they do a good job of doing it. So sales is an innate ability in all of us. Whether or not we choose to make it our profession, that's a completely different story. But to answer your question, I'd like to have them take something that they're familiar with, that they maybe recently purchased, or an idea, and have them turn it around and try to sell me the product. So I'd like to ask them to see how they respond to me and give me a viewpoint of, do they understand what sales is? Do they have the capability? Do they ask questions? Do they find out a little bit what I'm looking for? And then therefore, do they have enough technical knowledge? Why did they buy the product? And do they use that with me to see if I will turn around and buy the product from them? So it's a quick little exercise. It costs nothing, but it really tells you it's a really great story on this person in a sales environment. Do they show the capabilities and able to do the job? So that's a technique that I typically like to use.
Great. So John, how do you decide, or what do you do when you come across a person who is apparently capable, and you think this would be a good fit from a capability perspective, but then you don't know whether this person is actually going to perform or provide the level of achievement that is consistent with the capability? We always come across that situation where somebody comes across as really capable, but then the achievement is lacking.
For me, the biggest thing that I look into is, why are they doing it? So I ask, have they ridden with other sales reps? What's their expectation of income? What do they think their day is going to look like? And even if there's somebody, like, we used to hire a lot of scientists to become sales reps. So in the beginning, before we got a track record, we were getting green scientists right out of the lab. And if they hadn't done any homework, if they hadn't talked to some of the reps that call on them, then, or if they were doing it because they thought they were going to get rich, I wasn't as likely to give them that chance. I do agree with Tim as far as getting them to sell us on something, but more importantly, I need to know what motivates them and why do they want to get into this field. Too many people, whether it's pharmaceuticals or medical or technology, think that sales reps are, sexy. And they don't realize the number of hours that are put in. They don't understand the paperwork requirements. They don't understand that customers are going to yell at them. And so I try and explain all that to them and watch their face. And I can pretty much rule out people that are just going to freak. They're not going to make it. I used to have nurses that said, I don't know why I can't be a sales rep and make 6 figures, and I'm the one doing the training. 90% of the time they get in the job, found out some manager was going to call them about their quota attainment, tell them their paperwork wasn't in on time, and on top of that, the customer was calling saying, get back here at 11 o'clock and help me. And they quit. So I always do my best to understand what the successful sales reps are doing out there, what's their day like, who are their customers, what are their customers like, what level of expertise is required of them from the customers. And then I try and see if the person sitting in front of me is even interested in living up to that expectation. Usually if they're green, if they're any good, they've gone out and ridden with a sales rep. They've called customers and talked to the customers. They've done some level of due diligence, and they'll sit there and say, well, I've never lived this, but let me tell you what I found out. And those people I'm more likely to give a chance.
Thank you, John. And Lee, you had mentioned that it's not so much as the best salespeople, but perhaps the process that you put in place where the company is investing in growing revenue, and therefore it should not be dependent on simply the people being hired. That's what essentially you're saying. So what's your take on capable people? Can your processes make them perform?
One of the things that I do is help companies go from being people dependent to process dependent. It's very difficult to have a scalable sales organization where you have 15 people, or in Lisa's case 40 people, doing 40 different things. You can't measure it, you can't coach it, and you can't develop others around it. And so coming back to the point around hiring and predicting, it really does come back to that profile of your ideal salesperson, which you prioritize between required and desired attributes. And so, for example, you look at the success factors. So those people who are tremendously successful in your sales team, what are some of the things that they do, or what are some of the things about them that lead them to be successful? And then at the other side, for those who have not performed well, what are some of the things that lead salespeople to fail? Whether it be an activity level, or, John talked about some points, and Tim and Lisa, different attributes or things that would affect a salesperson's performance. And that comes back to your screening process as you're evaluating sales talent and saying, okay, we know what it takes to be successful in our organization. We also know what it causes failure. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a company where for sport, the CFO chews up salespeople. I'm sure that doesn't happen in any of the organizations that are watching this conversation. No, actually it happens quite often. But at the same time, the salespeople in this particular company have to work with the CFO to get pricing for their deals. And so if you have a salesperson who can't stay in the box, can't work with CFOs that are tough to get the pricing they need to get their deals done, they're going to fail in the organization. So that becomes something that you have to evaluate with your candidates beyond just, are they a great prospector or a strong closer?
The next question, again, for Lisa, is about profiling. We profile the job, we identify the key desirable attributes, and oftentimes you come across almost the same looking job profiles across the companies. That can be possible. If profiling is such an important aspect of identifying great candidates, how come there are a few set of profiles?
Well, it's interesting that back in my ADP days, we changed around our profile quite a few times. So at one point we were looking for people with 2+ years of successful sales experience. Then we went to the college campuses and looked to hire people that have no bad habits and teach them the right way from the first or from the beginning. But the problem with those people was they thought that they wanted to get into sales, but then once they got here into sales, they realized it wasn't where they wanted to go. So I disagree in that profiles are very similar within companies. I think it really is based upon the blueprint for success for companies. And that's one of the big areas that we help companies. A lot of salespeople are out there winging it. And to Lee's point, to make sure everybody's on the same page, to measure the same metrics, to have expectations as far as activity levels, and to John's point, as far as letting people know that these are the expectations, and even in some instances, as John did, painting a bleaker picture to see how they overcome adversity, because that's one of the key areas that I always look for, someone that could deal with adversity, someone that could deal with no's. I say, why wouldn't everybody in this whole wide world be in sales? There's no cap to what you can make, you get to meet new people all the time, but the fact is, if you're decent, you're going to get every 7 no's to every 3 yeses. So a lot of it is the personality, the attitude, and the willingness to deal with adversity.
Thank you, Lisa. Back to John about profiling. Obviously, profiling is important, but there are just a few limited number of attributes. When you say profiling is critical, how do you make profiles so specific, given that there are such few attributes that you might be looking for?
That's a great question. I want to know what's a realistic quota for the territory. We were doing this morning. We create the job description without any name attached to it. We create the job description so it meets the goal that the company needs it to meet financially, and then you back down, you kind of go in reverse. If I understand how much sales I have to make, then I also need to know how much of this territory, is there a high market share there, so it's more of a maintenance program, or is low market share, so I need somebody that can actually grow market rapidly, or somewhere in the middle. I need to know what are the customers like. Do they need a lot of maintenance, or is relationship important? And all this goes into the job description. The other thing I want to know is who's the sales manager, and how do they manage, and what level of education are they going to provide. If I've got a sales manager that I'm recruiting for, and I know that sales manager is going to do a great job of training, and they're really going to work through the process, they have a sales pipeline, they have coaching reports, then I'm going to be more comfortable putting maybe a diamond in the rough in there. But if I know I've got a sales manager that doesn't have any of those skills and is just going to use this person up, then I'm going to try and find somebody that doesn't need the training or possibly doesn't even expect it. So you build all those things into the job description without a name attached to it, and then you go out and trying to find a person that can make that job description become alive and be successful.
Thanks, John. I will ask this question of Tim. Tim, what John has described, does that make sense to you, or do you have any other approach in identifying the pool of candidates that you should look at? And again, my key question there is, does this job description, is it sufficient in identifying the candidates that you're looking for?
I think John's absolutely correct. I think there's a lot of criteria that goes into play to making the right decision, hiring the right person for the right coach. I've seen people come through the door that had great skill sets and didn't need a lot of training, and you put them with a manager that's a little bit more hands-on, and they blow out. So John's absolutely correct on looking at the person and also the management. But one of the things I'd like to profile for is also skill sets. Is what's the job going to take, and do they display those along the interview process? I mean, usually I have a four-step interview process where they see at least 3 managers and they have to do a full ride day in the field. So therefore, you get a real good feeling from each manager on how what their experience was with that person. Also, you really find out is on the ride day, the ride along, is, they tend to open up to those salespeople a little bit more. So you get a better skill set. And one of the things we like to do is actually encourage the person that's on the actual ride to take the next call. Even though they don't know it, that's why the salesperson is there to protect them. But what it does is, what it does from our end is we can follow up with the salesperson that we already on board with us and say, did they demonstrate? Were they afraid? Did they show these initiatives? Were they excited about it? Were they timid? All the things. These are just little breadcrumbs that lead someplace. So John's absolutely correct on the process and his level, on the sense of making sure you find the right person for the right fit. I just think there's other ways to profile it, and I think skill set to me is a lost art. People just throw up their product lines most of the time in some of the sales calls I've seen, versus actually taking the time to really understand the customer's needs, therefore matching the right product or solution to them, and then ultimately walking away with a sale. When you try to squeeze the round peg into the square hole, it's not going to work, and you're going to walk away frustrated. And that's why most salespeople walk away with less sales than more sales, because they're trying to squeeze too much, or what's the most profitable for them, and not what's right for the customer.